Today, let's take a look at how the Fellowship phase works in the One Ring 2nd edition. A Fellowship phase marks the conclusion of an adventuring phase, and provides a time of peace and downtime for your heroes to recover, spend their adventure and skill points, and prepare for what is next. There are 4 steps for a Fellowship phase, which are setting a duration, choosing a destination, performing updates, and choosing undertakings. There is also a special type of Fellowship phase called Yule, which I will cover at the end of this video. So, let's start at the beginning and set a duration. During an adventuring phase, players might be lucky enough to have a day or so of downtime, but a Fellowship phase can last from a week up to an entire season. For this example, I will say that Ingold, Elahir, and Fastred have arrived in Rivendell, where they will remain for a few weeks. Now it's time for our heroes to spend those hard-earned experience points to improve skill and combat proficiencies and possibly earn a new rank in Valor or Wisdom. They can also recover some hope and remove shadow points. Let's start with spending experience points. Taking a look at the chart on page 119, we can see the cost of each type of upgrade. This chart looks similar to the one that you would have seen on page 46 when making your character originally. However, the costs are different here, so make sure you're using the right chart. Skill points, as the name suggests, can be spent to improve your ranks and skills, while adventuring points can be spent to improve combat proficiencies or your Valor and Wisdom scores. There are a few important limitations to remember when performing updates. You can only improve each skill or combat proficiency by a maximum of 1 rank during a single Fellowship phase. And you can only increase your Valor or Wisdom score, not both. And you can only increase it by 1 rank. However, you can also choose a new reward when you gain a new rank in Valor, or a new virtue when increasing your Wisdom. For this example, I'll just perform updates for Fastred, who has 15 skill points and 15 adventure points to spend. I'll do adventure points first, which is tough. I want to increase his combat proficiency in either bow or sword, but I also want to gain a new rank in Wisdom. Those weapon proficiencies are very tempting, but I think I'll gain the new rank in Wisdom. That will give me an additional D6 on shadow tests to avoid greed or sorcery, which will pair very nicely with Fastred's Hobbit sense. But even more excitingly, I get to choose a new virtue. This could either be one of the starting virtues on page 80, but now I also have access to the cultural virtues starting on page 85. Small Folk gives Fastred a +2 to his parry rating when fighting opponents bigger than himself, which is very often, and lets him more easily take the rearward stance in combat. And, since his main combat proficiency is in bows, this seems like a good virtue to take. That update will take 8 points, so I still have 7 adventure points left. That could be spent to gain a combat proficiency of 1 in axes or spears, but the points will be much better saved so that during the next Fellowship phase I can increase either bows or swords, or maybe even both. Moving on to skill points, I will spend 8 points to increase Fastred's craft skill to 2, and I think after all this time adventuring, he has earned a point in Explore, which costs 4 points. I have 3 skill points left, which is not enough to spend on anything, so those points will be saved for the next Fellowship phase. Now it is time for some spiritual recovery. During each Fellowship phase, all player heroes automatically recover a number of hope points equal to their heart score. Players can also remove some shadow points that they may have accumulated. The amount depends on how noteworthy their fight against the shadow was during the last adventuring phase, as determined by the lore master. If the company's actions marginally interfered with the return of the shadow, each player can remove 1 shadow point. If they actively hindered or damaged the enemy, each player hero removes up to 2 shadow points. Or, if the player heroes have committed feats that would gain the attention of the Dark Lord himself or one of his major servants, then the player heroes can remove up to 3 shadow points. I'll say that Fastred and company hindered the enemy, so they can all remove 2 shadow points. The final step of a Fellowship phase is for the player heroes to choose Undertakings. During a regular Fellowship phase, the company will be able to choose 2 options from the list starting on page 121. The first undertaking can be any from the list, as long as they are not Yule specific. The second must be tied to one of the character's callings. This will be noted in the description of the undertaking, like this. My company is comprised of a captain, a messenger, and a warden. So for this example, I will say that the company as a whole will choose Ponder Storied and Figured Maps, to give them a bonus to some of their roles during the journey phase. And then I will choose to Strengthen Fellowship as my free undertaking granted by having a captain in my company. One other aspect of Fellowship phases is that each character is also able to change their useful items, so long as they keep in mind their character's maximum number of useful items, as shown by their standard of living. This can be found on page 49. Lastly, let's take a look at the special Yule Fellowship phase. Yule typically happens during the midwinter, and your company should have 1 every 3 Fellowship phases. The company could spend Yule together, or disband for a time to go to their separate homelands. A Yule phase advances the timeline by 1 year. This means player heroes grow 1 year older, and the lore master can also use this time to update players on what is happening in the larger world. Yule is generally longer than other Fellowship phases. and that time grants players a few unique bonuses. First off, players can recover all their spent hope points instead of just an amount equal to their heart score. Secondly, they gain extra skill points equal to their wits rating. Another bonus to having a long break during Yule is that instead of the company only getting to choose 2 undertakings, every player can choose an undertaking, and then the company as a whole can pick one extra undertaking. This one has to be connected to one of the player hero's callings, just like in a regular fellowship phase. Taking a look at the list of undertakings, you'll notice there are quite a few options that are only available during Yule. To put this all a little more simply, during a regular fellowship phase, the company can choose a maximum of 2 undertakings. During a Yule phase, the company can choose a number of undertakings equal to the number of player heroes plus 1. The last thing to remember about fellowship phases is that if you are using the Eye of Mordor rules, the company does not gain any eye awareness during the phase, and the eye awareness is set back to its starting score at the beginning of the next adventuring phase. There you have it. Hopefully that clears up any questions you might have had about this phase of the game and gets you excited about updating your character. That's all from me for now, and I also think this video should be the last one to explain the various rules of the One Ring 2nd Edition. It only took me a little over 3 years. As far as what's up next, I am nearly done playing through the new starter set, so once I've finished, I'll make a video about that. Thanks so much for watching everyone, have a great day.